All right. Happy Thursday, everyone. We are so excited to be joined by Miss Kay Rhodes, all the way from East St. Louis. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, my name is Becky. I'm one of the program managers at ISTI. And thanks for joining us for our Teacher Thursday in our Spring Spotlight series. So Kay, we're so excited to have you. I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a little bit of background and just tell us about you.
Thanks, Becky. I currently am now called the Math Instructional Facilitator for East St. Louis School District 189. I spent the first part of the year teaching an SAT prep course. I think this is my 14th year in East St. Louis. I was trying to count them up before, mostly as a math teacher and then working at the district office with all the math teachers in the district. And this is basically my second year with the ISTE program, so it's exciting for us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, yeah, I love hearing that you've been with East St. Louis for so long. It's clearly a great community and we love working with them. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what brought you to your current role and really what brought you to East St. Louis?
So I had been a middle school teacher for a while and really kind of missed the high school age kids. And so I left the middle school. I loved the middle school, but I guess maybe I missed the content. I'm not quite sure. So, I sought out a job and I had a friend that worked in East St. Louis and she said, hey, you would love it at East St. Louis High School. And, I'll be honest, I was a little nervous at first. I didn't know what to expect. And I went down there and I had a wonderful experience. My first year there, I had an awesome co-teacher who kind of helped me learn the ropes about the district. And so then I taught Algebra 1 a couple years, and then I moved to teach Algebra 2 for 3 or 4 years. And then at that point, I became an instructional coach for the high school and then moved into my role at the district office to work with math teachers. And this year, it's been really a lot of fun to be at the high school for the beginning of the part of the year. I loved being back with the kids, and I've always tried to find different ways to kind of insert myself back into the high school so I could be with the kids. So this year, to be back in the classroom helped me really see some of the challenges that our teachers are going through, but also gave me the chance to really build some good relationships with the kids.
I love that. And especially in education, I feel like the farther up you get, the less and less kid face-to-face time. And then you're like, wait, I miss it. That's why I fell in love with education and all that. So that's great that you kind of get a little bit of the best of both worlds this year. You get to see the students and then also kind of help as a district what that transformation looks like and really kind of diving into math instruction, which is great. So for those who may be watching or just in general, ISTI works with a lot of schools around the state. And while we are stationed in Chicago, East St. Louis is the farthest school from Chicago that we work with. And I think that's both a unique challenge and unique strength. So I'd love to hear from you, just working in East St. Louis and thinking about the cities that are adjacent, being closer to St. Louis or Springfield and then Chicago. What challenges present themselves or what strengths do you feel like that brings to your community?
So, for us in East St. Louis, having access to St. Louis is really wonderful. There are so many. St. Louis is really a kid-friendly kind of place. I mean, the zoo, the science center, Grants Farm, all those kinds of things are free activities for kids. And so, our students in the district get to take a lot of field trips to places like that because they are free. And so that works out really nice for our kids. There's a lot of industry, a lot of technology, a lot of places like that that are in St. Louis that we have fairly easy access to. I mean, truthfully, Springfield, Champaign, Chicago seems so far away to us when we have St. Louis right next door. I mean, literally, from the school or from the school district to St. Louis, it's a 5-minute drive. It's across the river. So while it's an entire state away, it's a 5-minute drive for us to get there. So that's really nice. I think sometimes challenges, I don't know that I necessarily always see the challenges. Some of the other people of the district may tell you that there are a lot more challenges only because they have to work with rules and regulations that have to happen between 2 different states. And I think sometimes there are things like that that do create some challenges. Those are probably things that people above me deal with more so than me, because if I have a problem, I just call and say, hey, could you help us make this work? So, we're lucky that in our office, Sydney is our person that does a lot of work with our community relations. And so she really understands those ins and outs. And so I rely on her a lot when we have to deal with something that has to happen with a business or a technology or something like that across the river.
Is that, you feel like, unique to East St. Louis too, that they do have such a community feel, like you said, Sydney helps as a community liaison, in past school districts that you may have worked with. Is that the same scenario, or is that kind of a perk with being in East St. Louis?
That's a huge perk. I mean, we're so lucky. She worked so hard with us to build those relationships with all the kinds of businesses and people and people outside the community that want to help the community, people within the community that want to continue to build and grow our kids and
right.
Our education system. Yeah.
When we kind of hear about this community just focus in general, I think that brings up a lot of what you do with STEM Challenge and the idea of partnerships, and not just partnerships within the classroom, but really partnerships within the community as it's a big whole. So why do you feel like industry partnerships and mentorships are really beneficial for high school students?
You know what? Our kids learned so much just this year. First of all, this idea of learning how to network is huge. I don't think any of us are very good at that. And so the mentor matching engine for our kids is huge. And the fact that our mentors came to our school and they came about monthly so that our kids actually got to see them face to face and talk to them. I think the other thing that we're learning through all of this is, for me, I hate to say it, but, really, truly doctors, nurses, teachers, healthcare professionals, those are the kind of jobs I know about. And right. I don't know what kind of jobs really occur in some of these businesses that we work with and some of the partners that we have. And so for us to get to hear about them and for us to get to hear the track that those people took to get to the job that they have is really interesting, so that our students begin to realize that, well, one of the people we met when we went and visited the power plant was a man who had graduated with a marketing degree and then went to work for I want to say he always said he went from trash to ash. And so he worked with garbage collection and now he's working in the coal ash. But he had a major in marketing. It has nothing to do with what he's doing now. And so for our kids to hear that it's okay that they don't know their final destination right now, but they can still have a chance to explore that. So that's kind of what we all did together this year, which was fun.
I love that. And especially too with ISTI's mission is we want to broaden that definition of what STEM is. So for your students to see, okay, I know someone who's working with coal ash byproduct, but they have a marketing degree, it just kind of solidifies that learning isn't linear and their path isn't linear. And that definitely came across in just reading students' posts on MME and just hearing the interaction with the mentor. So I'm excited to kind of hear a little bit more about that solution too. We also know that East St. Louis is really unique and that you all have a team that is working on it at East St. Louis. And so in most high schools, we have, one teacher, maybe a support staff that's assisting them, but you all really work as a team, and we've been lucky enough to get to know each of you in your kind of different roles, but I would love to hear more about that. Kind of what is the role of each member of this team that supports the STEM challenge at East St. Louis High School?
So because a lot of us have all sorts of commitments around the school and through the district, we decided early on that it was important that we had more than one so that we could take turns and do some things with the kids. And so that's kind of what we did. We have 3 people who are part of the math department. We have a teacher that's part of the science department and a teacher that is part of the technology CTE part of our building. We also have great support from our tech department at the district office. I mean, they're the ones, truthfully, that have provided the financial support for us this year to help us with after school transportation. But then when we started kind of working on our challenge, we all kind of took apart the challenge itself and decided, okay, we set our when we came up with what we were going to do, we divided kind of into 3 teams, and we had a group of kids that were going to work on, a technology component. They were going to create a video and they were going to do some things that we hoped we could show at the showcase. And then we had kind of our oral team and that we're going to do the actual presentation there. So, and then we had the team that was going to try to build a brochure so that we had something to pass out that reflected the research that we had done. And so we kind of all attached ourselves to either the part about that we liked or the part about that we felt most comfortable with so that we could work with those kids. And in turn, it also gave us some freedom on our days when we met with kids to each of us kind of do a little bit of work with individual kids. We each took we kind of did icebreakers and things like that we were comfortable with and enjoyed interacting with the kids in different ways. So it's really nice. And it helps us too every day at school to know that there's somebody we can count on. So it's built our relationships as well.
I like it. It's your own little network of teachers.
It is.
That's great. You're modeling it for the students, which we love to hear.
Right.
You also have the unique challenge of working with Vista Dynegy. They are a very technical challenge. So while some of our challenges are a little bit more broad, This one is very technical, and I hear it from my colleagues a lot too that were the ones writing the challenge. But even as adults, reading through what Vista Dynegy does is very technical and very science-based, and might be hard to wrap around. So how did you and your team of teachers kind of tackle that? How did you decide to roll it out? And I know you touched on a little bit, but maybe a little bit more about really just kind of attacking the technical piece of it.
So I think early on when Jill and I even attended that meeting at Vista the very first time when we started getting together, we left there, we're like, we have no idea what they were talking about. We kind of felt like we were way in over our heads. And so we took some of the things that we did in our little, our first meeting, I believe it was in October, and that's what we took back to our kids. We read through that problem of practice that Vista gave us, and then we just put some posters around the room, and we had the kids go stand at the posters and write down what questions did they have after reading it. And then we took pictures of those questions off of all those posters, and we shared them back to Vista so that when they came for our kickoff meeting, they had some ideas of what we were struggling with and what we didn't know about. And I think that was really nice because they came very prepared to answer the kids' questions early on. We spend a lot of time learning about coal ash, all of us. I mean, none of us as teachers knew anything about it. We had no idea what it looked like, what it smelled like, what it was used for, where it came from. We didn't know there were 3 different kinds. We didn't, so as teachers, we had to let the kids know we weren't going to be guiding them. They were going to be guiding themselves, and we were going to be counting on those mentors to do that for us. So we kind of dived right in with the kids, like I said, and participated in the research with them. We were very lucky that after our initial meeting, our kickoff meeting, and Matt Balance and Tamika Cole were there, that Matt called me right away on the phone and said, "Kay, when can I come back?" And so we invited him back, and he came, I think 2 or 3 Wednesdays right after that, because that was our meeting day. And he came those Wednesdays, and he brought samples of coal ash for the kids to see. He brought products that coal ash is used for, so that our kids really could kind of get a hands-on and a feeling for what this product really was used for out in the marketplace. And we struggled a little bit at first to figure out what we were going to do with this challenge. And so I think it was probably about Christmas time when Tamika and Matt came back and said, "You know what, you guys, we need a community project." And so, we kind of sat there and brainstormed with them, and then we turned it around back to the kids and said, "Okay, what are some things that we could do to benefit East St. Louis itself? Let's not kind of worry about the coal ash right now. Let's talk about some things that we really need." And so we challenged the kids to come up with individual projects that they would like to see happen. And a lot of our kids talked about a memorial garden. We've lost a lot of teachers and students in the past couple of years to a variety of illnesses and violence and things like that. So there were several kids who presented projects that had to do with building memorial gardens, either in the school or outside of the school. We had one student that a pair of sisters who brought back an idea to try to refurbish some buildings that are part of East St. Louis and to try and create some housing for families. We talked about road repair and sidewalk repair. And so then kind of what we ended up doing was we took all of these projects and broke them apart into bits and pieces. We put all those bits and pieces of the projects on a board, and the kids came in. I think we had stickers or something. The kids got to vote for 5 things. And so they came in and they voted for 5 things. And then we took all of those things, and that's how we wrapped them into what we were going to do for our final project.
I love that. And one thing too that I heard you say is a lot about this process, that it wasn't just like a one-day experience. You had your kickoff and you knew an idea right away, but really there was a lot of learning, there was a lot of questioning, there was a lot of, maybe being uneasy about what this was asking. And then it sounds like it really wrapped in well with the community piece. When thinking about the STEM challenge as a whole and bringing it to East St. Louis, how do you feel like it really encompasses kind of problem-based learning or even project-based learning that we hear a lot about in education?
Well, like I said, we started with nothing. I mean, and really we had to come up with a beginning and an end, and then kind of where we were, right? I think when we had to leave for remote learning, is trying to fill in all of those steps in between. And that's where I think all of those things that we learn in science and math classes in terms of problem solving ideas is how do we get from the beginning of this project to the end of the project? What are all the steps that have to go in the middle? And again, like I said, we kind of dived into 3 different groups so that the kids would have a purpose in the group that they were in and know what they were going to follow up and follow through on. And that's kind of, I guess, more as teachers, what we were able to do with our guidance is try to help them get from beginning to end, even if we might not know all of the middle steps that were in between. We enlisted Sydney's help again to kind of talk to us a little bit about what might be involved. We had conversations with our CTE department, I guess, in terms of how they might be able to help us in our final project solution and what they could do in terms of helping Vista out, what parts of this project might we able to, we as a school be able to complete on our own and sustain it going forward. So there were lots of conversations, and the kids emailed teachers they didn't know to ask them for help, and we invited those teachers to come in to see the ISTE STEM Challenge group in actions. And we tried to branch ourselves out a little bit so that more people around the school knew what we were doing and trying to accomplish. So that was fun too.
It sounds like a lot of collaboration, which, as we know, is something that's absolutely necessary for our future workforce. And as we develop that now in our high schoolers, what a way to see that, from their teachers playing a role, but even as they work with, teachers outside of that and work with their mentors, that collaboration piece sounds like it was really kind of a guiding factor, which is great to hear. That's what we want. Thinking about, again, just the course of the year and the process that took place. I know your kickoff was earlier. I believe it was November-ish. And then thinking to kind of where we are right now, what do you hope your students' biggest takeaway from the experience is?
I hope that truthfully they've become a little bit more creative thinkers. They have more innovative ideas. They realize that they don't have to do things on their own, that it's okay to reach out for help. I mean, we didn't hesitate along the way to say, hey, we need to call Mr. Locke at the head of the CTE department and see what those people can do. I think all of us together, the collaboration is huge for them. I think also too, learning how to communicate with professionals. We had to have lots of conversations. If you guys remember back to the pieces of paper that we had to organize in terms of who was communicating well and not. I mean, we shared those with our kids. We went through that exercise with our kids. When they made posts on the MME, we asked everybody to kind of edit and evaluate those. When they sent an email to that teacher, we talked about, how does it sound? Do we sound like, we know what we're talking about when we're inviting them to come and participate with us? And, and hoping they understand that, a first draft isn't always where I'm going to end. And I think too, the idea of we wanted them to take ownership in a project that didn't belong to any one of them. And so we wanted them all to feel like they contributed to that, and that effort, that group effort of all of them working together was so huge for us. And I think they were all excited about being a part of this.
Something that I really like that you just said is just the students have ownership over their work, but it's not their project. It really is as a team. And I think that's a really unique kind of differentiation to bring out about doing it in ISTI STEM Challenge, is that it really is that the students have the autonomy to make connections, to learn to communicate, to ask questions, but it really is kind of coming together for that innovation piece that you just mentioned, which I think it's just a good perspective that I'm excited. I'm glad that you shared it. Thinking too, kind of before the COVID disruption, we know that East St. Louis was, as you mentioned, working towards a community-specific solution to their kind of more complex coal ash challenge. So can you tell us maybe a little sneak peek of what that solution was shaping up to be? And if you felt like, if there were markers along the way that really just strengthened that solution for the students?
We met in a classroom in the building every day, and outside of the windows of our classroom was a very, very dilapidated tennis court. And so ultimately what we decided that we would do was to ask Vista to help us repair the tennis courts so that our students could use them and that they could be available for our community to use when school wasn't using them for their own resources. As part of that, we tried to incorporate some of those ideas of the memorial gardens in terms of having a place for kids to be able to go and think about, friends that they have lost and those kinds of things. So we had invited CTE to kind of help us build a gazebo and build some benches out there. A lot of the things that the kids realized was that the coal ash product is often used in, we talked about in tracks and those kinds of things, in cement blocks. And so building some walkways and building, retaining walls and some things like that with those coal ash products is kind of how we were going to bring that idea of coal ash into our community. We also, part of what we were going to do was to alleviate any fears about what coal ash was with our community. One of the things we had learned along the way was that sometimes people don't know what it is and don't know if there are byproducts in that it might be harmful. And so that was part of the brochure that we were going to design or still, that we still have in place, is to talk about what coal ash is and what's in it and what's not in it. So that's kind of where we were headed. Vista was generously going to try and help us fund some of those things. It's been an amazing chance for us to work with them and know how committed they were to our kids and to our community and our school. I mean, it was wonderful. So I'm hopeful at some point we can see it to fruition. We had 3 seniors in our group that will be leaving, but much of our group consisted of our sophomores and juniors. So they'll still be around in the fall. So I'm hoping that we'll figure out how to continue to work on this.
Excellent. Well, we're happy to help kind of make that happen the best that we can. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So we kind of dove into the challenge and the technical side of it and kind of gotten to hear a sneak peek of the solution. But thinking about STEM overall, we all know the science, technology, engineering, and math. And I feel like math often gets grouped in with the others. Like, yeah, it supports engineering, or, oh, it's a critical part of science and technology. But math is also very integral on its own. Just thinking through, problem solving and how, math teachers, I was a math teacher, that's why I feel very connected. But I think math really is a topic that has a lot to give in terms of preparing students to be thinkers. So how, based on your knowledge of mathematics, and especially being a mathematic instructional lead for the district, how do you think that plays into prepping students for the STEM challenge?
We talked a little bit about that. There wasn't a lot of true mathematics that was used in our culminating project. We did some work with some areas, some volumes and things like that. I mean, kids were out there measuring distances and trying to figure out area and trying to look at what the dimensions were of tennis courts and all of those kinds of things. But I think you're exactly right. It just goes back to those ideas of problem solving and being logical in what we need to do and thinking through those steps and coming up with what has to happen. I think we could have taken a very mathematical route in what we were going to do, but that's just not where this project ended up at. So while sometimes I think, I love my content and I'm proud of my content, sometimes it doesn't come into play, and that's okay. But I think along the way, the kids still saw it in use. I don't know how many of the other STEM challenge groups actually got to take a field trip to visit and see where their partners actually do business every day. And so we got to see a lot of mathematics when we took a trip to the power plant and got to talk to them and see what was going on and see how, things were routed and rerouted and how the timing of certain things were so vital to making sure that electricity is generated every single day for us to use in our actual homes in East St. Louis.
That's awesome. What made you want to be a math teacher?
You know what? Honestly, I tell this to people all the time. I was a much better English student than I ever was a math student. But in 11th grade, my Algebra 2 teacher, I hope he's not out there, was terrible. And so I ended up kind of having to teach my own self Algebra 2 and taught my own classmates Algebra 2. And I think the fact that I liked the challenge, that it wasn't my strongest subject, that I really had to work at it to do it. I knew teaching, both of my parents were teachers, so it was always, I think, what I was going to do.
Yeah.
They were actually elementary teachers, so the idea that I was going to be a secondary teacher was kind of frightening to them, but yeah. So that's how I ended up there.
Excellent. No, I think that's a good lesson, though, even for your students to hear of, you don't have to be the strongest person in one thing, but understanding how to teach yourself and how to continue learning actually makes you kind of a stronger recipient in the end, whether that's you're a teacher or an engineer or whatever that might be. So that's a great kind of message. thinking through, obviously, again, COVID has certainly given us quite a bit of a disruption. And normally we get to celebrate with a culmination event, which we're kind of pivoting. But your students have done a lot of impressive work this year. And so we are excited. Again, we've gone through their MME, we've heard them communicate, we've talked to Vista and Dynegy. And I think one thing we'd love to hear from you is just what was your favorite moment from the STEM challenge this year? And if you have a few, feel free to share as many as you want.
I can't say enough about Matt and Tamika and the things they did and gave to our kids, the fact that they were willing to come to East St. Louis on a regular basis. I was proud of our kids for welcoming them in and their expertise. But the field trip was a fantastic experience for us to get out there and meet the people who worked in that plant every day. And I was so proud of our kids, the questions that they'd asked and that they asked about the inner workings of the plant and the things that they had learned about the coal ash, and that they asked about internships in the plant. They talked about networking. They wanted to know more about, people. We met a lady who had worked for Vista and Dynegy or at the plant for 34 years and her experiences. We got to go out to see where they are reclaiming the land. And so we met the gentleman, like I said, who said he went from trash to ash, and he was part of that reclamation project. But the kids to get out there and say, you know what, why are they going to take this land and make it a golf course? We could make it this kind of thing. And for them to see how vast that energy plant is, the lake or pond that is there that helps to recycle the water in and out, and to see the wildlife was there and to talk about that. I mean, that experience in and of itself was a highlight of my own. I mean, I was so excited to be there. I mean, I learned so much. Like I said, we were in way over our heads from this. So that was a big part. But just the other thing that happened is the kids learning how to talk to one another respectfully, and to take their ideas from each other and work together to, talk to the mentors in MME, to write things down, to begin to accept that my idea didn't get chosen, but I can take what you did and we can work with that. So I was so proud of the work that the kids were doing. It was really fun for me to watch them grow through this whole process all year.
Well, thank you for guiding them through that. It really does take the team that you had just being open and patient and excited. It trickles down to the students, and we saw that. And so thank you.
That was the easy part.
Oh, go ahead. To anyone that's watching, if you have questions for Kay, you can go ahead and drop it in the comments. Otherwise, Kay, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you in person very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.